Was it excitement, nerves, pressure? What did that feel like?
I felt insecure. And when things became real, financial responsibility, relationships, I was afraid of losing what I already had.
The world is obsessed with fast track success, and it's easy to think people become successful overnight. But let's face it, more often than not, what we see on social media is total BS. I'm here to look past the perception of perfect success and focus on life's detours, perceived mistakes, and even wrong choices, and understand the real road traveled up the career ladder. After all, we're all effing up. Josh Perry is a high-performance coach dedicated to helping people break free from mental constraints to take their performance and vision to the next level. As a former X Games athlete who overcame multiple brain tumors, Josh brings a compassionate yet direct approach to helping people evolve beyond traditional performance strategies and into deeper knowing, alignment, and embodied execution in their lives. Josh, thank you so much for being on the Effing Up podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Why don't you talk about the work you do before we dive into your past?
I've been full-time professionally coaching. I say professionally because about 3 or 4 years prior, I had gone through a coaching certification just out of interest and passion, but I was still competing as a BMX athlete, freestyle BMX, like the X Games, backflips and all that stuff. I loved learning and wanted to do something with it later on. I love helping people evolve beyond performance, really being in touch with yourself and your discomfort and the thoughts and perceptions and personas we create. A lot of us are unknowingly performing an identity that we learned early on to be safe. We see a lot of this in the world and a lot of people saying, be authentic. And what does that really mean if you don't know you're not being authentic because you're largely driven by discomfort? I love helping people discover those blind spots.
Who do you coach?
My one criteria is the willingness to commit to the path of discomfort to reveal blind spots and how they've been holding us back.
I like to go back to childhood just for a brief bit to ask, if you look back and think about little Josh, is there a moment, an experience, a theme, something that comes to mind when you think about your career and made you who you are?
I started riding BMX around 11 or 12. I started skateboarding before then and rollerblading when that was really
And
popular.
is that late or early in the game?
Now it's kind of late, but back then 13 was about, when most
About right.
yeah. The reason I got a BMX bike is because I wanted a dirt bike, but my parents couldn't afford one. So I got the next best thing. So I always wonder, what would have happened if I got a dirt bike and then maybe grown up with me or went that route? Who knows? There was a version of me that was always outgoing. I seen pictures and family videos, always outgoing, wanted to sing, dance, express myself. Then I started to enjoy sports. When I was about 3, my mom remarried, and then that turned into a really negative relationship in terms of my experience. And so what I started to notice now looking back was there was a version of me that authentic expression started to be suppressed because when I did express myself, I was met with pain from physical to emotional to verbal, all created a sense of fear. And so now understanding what process I was going through, now I can understand how much fear and terror I was living in. I was trading my authenticity for attachment. As a child, that's what we unknowingly do because that's how we safe in the world. So then through sport, I found an outlet for trapped emotion. A lot of anger and rage I wasn't aware of until a couple of years ago through therapy and psilocybin to access a lot of that my nervous system had kind of blocked me out from. And then when BMX came around, it was something I excelled at quickly. It involved a lot of physical pain, which was familiar. It reinforced the story, the narrative I was living with. I'm someone that goes through pain to grow. Wasn't aware of that at the time, but that was the correlation I found.
Wow.
It just became my safe space. Ironically, it wasn't very safe at all, but psychologically speaking and emotionally speaking, I could be and do, say what I wanted in that form. So
Yeah.
that's how it started, and turn that into a career.
What was it about who you authentically were that was being shut down? What was the reason the adult couldn't handle it?
To be clear, it wasn't my mom or my dad. It was my stepfather, my brother's dad.
Yeah.
Some of the memories I have was in speculating because he ended up dying years ago. So I couldn't even ask these questions if I wanted to. Through conversation with my mom and then put myself back in those situations, it was when I was out of line. I was being a, fucking 5 or 6 year old playing and not listening to the rules, especially as I got older. If I cried or I showed any weakness in terms of what a man should or shouldn't express, which now we know is very insecure to say that a human being shouldn't express emotion. From the speculation point of view, his discomfort of me not listening or me expressing something he wasn't able to express as a child and how he was parented. Mm. Every time I did something that wasn't aligned with what he wanted me to do, I was met with some form of pain. And then that equated, oh, I can't do the things I want because it's unsafe. I can't be myself. That's not literally what I was saying, but that's what I understood.
The automatic response. I get it.
My experience, I remember when I can get myself back there, I'll be curious how that evolves with the work I'm doing. I can remember certain moments where I just felt this deep level of sadness paired with fear because interpreting now who I was bad, it was wrong. And I was met with pain until I, changed who I was.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. Did you complete high school?
I dropped out of high school. I turned pro in BMX my junior year, moved to Greenville, North Carolina, where the top pros from around the world were living. And I was paying $200 a month for rent as a 17-year-old and competing at the same events I watched them growing up on TV. And
where were you born and raised? Where did you move from to get to North Carolina?
Eastern Massachusetts.
Okay.
I was born and raised, and then, the winters there, not very conducive for outdoor activities.
Okay. So you get the bike at 13, and then how does it evolve from there? How do you make the decision to drop out of high school? How did your family feel about it? So many questions here. Keep going.
I had been riding bikes and skateboards, but I didn't have a true BMX bike. It was just a Toys R Us bike, not conducive to it. So when I was 13, got a BMX bike for Christmas right after I turned 13 and became obsessed. Riding more and more, not playing other sports as much. Freshman year of high school, I didn't make the basketball team. I wasn't playing much anymore. All my free time went into working after school and riding BMX.
Did it blow to you to not be on the basketball team, or had you let go of that?
I felt a little upset because I tried out and didn't make it. And then instantly just was like, all right, well, I'll go ride. And then just kept riding. And then I started entering contests, local contests, amateur contests, and then started progressing in those, and then went to regional. And regional contests turned into national contests, and then national amateur events turned into being able to qualify for the pro open qualifier the next year. That interest turned into an obsession. Now I see the obsession was escaping and finding safety, which literally transformed into me leaving Massachusetts when I was 17 to come here to North Carolina.
Was your family supportive?
Yeah, I mean, both my mom, my dad, depending on what time in high school, I was at my mom's house or my dad's house, but between buying me the bike and then me doing chores to earn money to get parts and Christmas and my birthday and the gear, the parts to replace, because I was breaking parts all the time because I was in the learning phase. And then driving me around to all the events and my mom hanging out before I had a license at the skate park, just reading and sun tanning, which was a little embarrassing at the time. Hanging out so I could ride as much as I could.
You mentioned if you weren't riding in school or whatever, you were working. What did you do for work during that time?
I went to a technical high school, a trade school, starting my freshman year for landscaping. The summer between 8th and 9th grade, I was working for a friend of the family, his landscaping company. And I was like, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed using my body to move. And then I really enjoyed taking things and improving them visually, and then me putting the work in and the gratification that came from that. And I also was making really good money, $20 to $40 an hour.
Back then, that was incredible money. Yeah. For that age. Wow.
Yeah. So come mid sophomore year, if you had a B or better or B minus or better, you could qualify for the co-op program, which meant every 2 weeks you do academics. And then every other 2 weeks you go to your trade of choice to work. So I wouldn't even go to the school. I would just 6 a.m. go to work, 5 p.m. be done, go to the skate park. In summer, I was working and then going to ride.
When did you drop out and move? You said 17, junior, senior year?
I was between my junior and senior year. Long story short, there was a moment where my boss gave me an ultimatum. I was progressing and going to contests. I was taking Fridays and Mondays off. He had like 3 or 4 guys. I was one of the main crew running a truck and a 16-foot trailer with multiple mowers on my own. Like I had the clipboard back then. We have smartphones. They had a clipboard. Yeah, and I'm going to all the places and just doing the thing and being trained to run my own business one day. He always, after 4 or 5 years, would gift a truck and trailer and a mower and all the equipment to one of his guys, and they go off, start a small business. Didn't know anything about entrepreneurship, but that's apparently the path I was on. But I was progressing in my sport, my dream, taking Fridays, Mondays off. We had a conversation on the phone. He gave me an ultimatum and picked BMX. I intuitively knew I couldn't start this when I was 30 or 40, but I could go back to school 30 or 40 years old. I could start a business, whatever, but probably riding a BMX bike and doing backflips probably wouldn't work out too well. I made that decision. And then it was like halfway through the summer, I was just riding all day and then competing, flying around the country. I was in North Carolina. I was an hour and a half east in Greenville, training with the guys. And my mom got a letter in the mail after 30 days of missing my senior year in a row. I was expelled. I could come back the next year. I waited till Thanksgiving. A friend of mine that I was staying with from Massachusetts, like a couple towns away from me, was going to ECU in Greenville. We drove back for Thanksgiving. My mom walked in with me to sign me out of school officially. And then after Thanksgiving, drove back with him with some of my stuff and rented a 6x8 storage unit in his apartment. I had a blow up mattress, my clothes and some stuff, my bikes and my pads and all that downstairs. And that was where I stayed for the first couple of months living on my own. So I accidentally moved because I got expelled. And to your question earlier, my parents were very supportive. Some would argue a little too supportive because I was working full time, traveling, turned pro, and they forgot I had school. I forgot I had school too, but then the letter informed us.
Was the landscaping money enough to keep up with your gear, get your flights to the competition and everything? Or were you having familial support with that?
I've always had great support from my family, but I've been financially on my own. I don't come from a family beyond working class. I was taught to save money at a young age. But yeah, I was working even when I was home and now in school during the summers, paying my own bills and traveling. It wasn't until the last contest of the season where I'm net positive from the contest because of flight and hotel, paying for my gear. I would always use the check from the previous event to pay for my flight and hotel right when I got the check, just so that I was taken care of. And then the last event of the year, I would cash it and save it. When I moved to Greenville, I was even more so paying all my things. There is a side of BMX where you can perform shows for events, schools, all over. I mean, this is a whole other story, but I've been to all over the place, like India and Iraq and Saudi Arabia and other parts of the world, especially the country, performing to make some income. I wasn't working when I first moved to Greenville. I was living off of performance paychecks and contests. And I didn't have any sponsors at the time either, at least paying sponsors. That came after.
No sponsors until moving, not even in Massachusetts.
There's a term in BMX called flow. When you're pro, you're getting a paycheck, hopefully a travel budget and free product. The flow, also amateur, is just product. I had a sponsor help me with product like bikes and parts. Happened to make both of them. I didn't have any paying sponsors.
When you moved, was it excitement, nerves, pressure? What did that feel like?
It was pure excitement. Like I was in the dream that I didn't realize I was in the dream. I was still pursuing the dream. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It wasn't a conscious decision to move there. It kind of just happened to occur with different experiences and a letter in the mail saying I was expelled. And I was like, well, fuck it. I'll just stay here. And then the first couple months, I got an opportunity to tour Canada performing with motocross riders in arenas. And I made like $5,000. And I was like, cool, I can stay here longer. But I wasn't trying to live there. I just was like, well, I'll just stay here and just see. I didn't even have a plan, which is wild. I was in the dream, but unaware. I was still pursuing it, doing all the things.
Yeah.
And now I had no pressure really that I was aware of. Now, looking back, I was like, oh, I remember these conversations that I had with one of my best friends, Brandon, who I convinced to move out there. Conversations about money, stress, making my parents proud. And like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not going to college like some of my other friends. Like, I don't have a degree. I'm not really making that much money other than to survive and all these things. Now I can see that I was really stuck in my head, which is a great skill in some circumstances. But if it's an everyday thing, it creates more separation. The most important piece of separation was with myself. I felt insecure. And I started to notice compensatory patterns for feeling insecure was linked to my childhood in terms of authentically expressing myself. And when things became real, financial responsibility, relationships, I wasn't aware of what was going on. I was afraid of losing what I already had. I wasn't defined by what I wanted. I was defined by not losing it.
Yeah. What is the culture of BMX? Is it a party culture?
You rode hard and you partied hard.
Yeah.
ECU, Greenville is East Carolina University for people in America, outside of America. At the one time, it was like top 10 party school in America. Cheap cost of living, very small town. 40 to 60% of the population was students, BMX riders, age 16 to late 20s from all around the world, living the dream, paid to ride a bicycle, no job other than ride a bike. And a lot of times we're training hungover, but we're just, doing the thing. And those days would probably kill me now, but that's just what we're doing. As I progressed and I went through my own health adversities, I started to see things differently because I also started to see, health wasn't a top value, let alone on the value list. That quickly changed. And then over the years, I slowly started to shift my identity through my decisions and the choices I was making and how I perceived myself and where I wanted to go. And then I stopped doing certain things, which created its own level of discomfort to work through. So I was hearing things. Oh, you're not going to come out with the boys anymore. You're too good to drink now. Carry around this big jug of water at the skate park, eat protein, drink electrolytes, eat avocados. All this projection created more isolation. The very people I felt connected to, then I felt like an outsider again.
Imagine as a young kid, it was exciting to have this new life of 100% BMX and people to enjoy it with and party, whatever that means. Like, I'm sure you can find whatever you want, and just like you can in any aspect of living life. It probably felt so fun and free to start.
100%. It felt free. Then I realized how trapped I was. I was avoiding that feeling with how successful I looked on the outside, giving me permission to eat, party, drink, not sleep, and not have any discipline. It's a miracle I did what I did, made my way into the X Games, became friends with my heroes, zero guidance, just observation. Part of that observation was getting around the people I idolize as gods and was like, oh, you guys smoke weed? You guys drink alcohol? I had the belief that you couldn't do that to be successful. I started to see my social anxiety go down when I had more drinks or smoked more weed. I started to see all my problems, vanish away until they came back. I see now, if I had more guidance, perspective, and nuance and introspection, how much higher a level could I have gotten to? How much more impact could I have had on my career? And how much of the shit that I went through, I wouldn't have had to go through. I don't stay in that space. I just wonder sometimes.
On paper, it looks like you reached success overnight. You're the exception, not the rule. And you rose quickly and fast. But then I heard you making some comments like, I wasn't like those around me. I didn't have a degree, and I knew that this wouldn't last forever, that at some point I would get old enough and I'd have to worry about that. So it sounds like there's some conflict in those two things. Can you talk about the journey? Like, did you feel successful? Like it was going to last?
I'd say it was back and forth.
Mm.
I didn't plan to move. I just was like, I was visiting, and then circumstance changed. I was like, I'll just stay here a little bit longer and a little bit longer. I made the decision to stay when I invested in my own apartment, which is when I invited Brandon to come stay with me. And then we were doing the thing. We were here.
Mm.
The comparison came from some of my friends that were going to school there to get a degree, also in BMX, and then other friends outside of BMX that I was hanging out with and partying with that were going to school. And then friends of mine from, where I'm from originally, either working full-time jobs in trade or going to college to get degrees. And then the idea of the financial aspect, not making much more than to just get by.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing my other friends starting to have families, buy houses, and all the societal things you should do. at these increments of age.
They do.
Yes. And then I started to, think about, okay, well, what don't I have? And so I started comparing myself, and then I started to be informed by the things I didn't have. And in this case, I was just focused on essentially making enough money so that the thing I loved turned into survival. It started to mimic my upbringing and not feeling safe. I started to feel the perceived sense of safety through financial means. So it turned into a stress. Not being aware of it, I can talk about this now, and I put myself back into certain emotional states, became informed by what I didn't want to occur, which was to not be able to provide for myself and to have to go home and get a job. I was afraid of what that meant about me, that I was going to be a failure, that the people that doubted me were going to be right. It fucked up a lot of my focus because I was so attached to what would do well. I was so attached to thinking this way of riding would score well, which would put me here, which would equate to the pay. And there was moments, especially my last year competing, where I was just freely riding based on what I felt called to ride in my way and my style. And I knew it was good enough. And if it wasn't good enough, it didn't mean I wasn't good enough. That started to click. Ironically, it was my last year competing, but I got glimpses of it. I won events, best trick contests, and different podiums. So we have glimmers. It's not all just survival. There's glimmers because we are human.
Yeah.
A lot of it was just fear.
Talk to me about the trajectory of your career. You moved to Greenville. Describe how you moved along in your career from there.
Moved there 2007. Got my way to the X Games 2009. Training the off season 2010. Hit my head. Got a concussion. Got an MRI.
Oh, slow down.
Plenty of them. And that revealed an accident. So I won my first pro event 2009.
Okay.
X Games 2009, the summer. I was back on as a invited rider, the main series we had at the time called the Do Action Sports Tour. The one I started competing amateurly and then made my way to the pro ranks. This was the third year now. And then went international the first time that year to multiple trips, competing, filming video projects, magazine photos. Still didn't have a paying sponsor in 2010. In the off season of March, I was training, trying a new trick, fell, hit my head, got a concussion, went to get an MRI. And this was after a year and a half of complaining of headaches, migraines, vision problems, and being denied scans because they couldn't find anything in the blood work. They looked at me in shape, young, didn't need a scan, gave me pain pills, told me to come back if I needed more. Hit my head that day. The MRI showed a massive brain tumor, the first of many. And so looking back at that moment, and my surgeon said this, he's like, yeah, if you didn't hit your head, you may be dead in a couple months. So talk about perspective, a concussion saved my life. So my first 3 years of in Greenville was the highest of highs, and then literally thought I was going to die. And looking back at that moment, and that was one of the most terrified moments I had ever been in. And I remember viscerally feeling it. I was forced to feel in that case. And there was no rationale until a week later. And I just was like, how am I going to get better from this? I just blocked out all the fear. Going through it, I remember being terrified, trying to call my mom. I couldn't speak, like a bad dream. Brandon, my best friend, came to pick me up because I couldn't drive. And I remember just like crying with him and just being in shock, driving around in silence for a while and then finally able to talk. And then I was like one of those moments.
Know for sure when they first came upon the tumor that it was malignant or benign?
No, they didn't know. I remember hearing you have something in your brain that shouldn't be there. I was like, what do you mean? I can't, my brain?
Like a monkey?
How does that work? And he's like, well, we don't know if it's benign or cancerous, but we do know you have a brain tumor. And it's probably going to be really difficult to get back to day-to-day things. And I was by myself. I didn't know I was about to be diagnosed with a brain tumor. The first thing I thought of was like, fuck, I'm dead. Well, when am I going to die? What do I do with my things? How do I tell people? And I remember vividly asking these questions. What did I do to deserve this? Am I a bad person? Why is this happening to me?
Dear God, you just gotten started. It had been 3 years since you moved, but still, like, you're just getting started. You're getting to an amazing place. You've got a paid sponsor now. And it's like, this shit gets dropped in your lap.
Yeah, it makes sense. There would be a brain tumor because of how stuck in my head I was performing a role that I didn't know I was performing to get safety and the expense and the energy and the exhaustion that creates in the body. And looking at cellular division and rapid growth and all these things from being constantly inflamed on top of the diet I was on and the alcohol every day to suppress all the emotional shit. Like, makes sense. I got a brain tumor. That's how I look at it. Also, I was very fortunate
Maybe.
it be benign and removed, and that's a whole story of its own of how that went a lot quicker than I thought. The irony is it came back multiple times because I had a lesson to learn. Suppressing myself. When I look back, there's a quote that's really helped me, and for one of my teachers, says, life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. I look back, it all makes sense. Getting into Ayurvedic medicine, I have been in the accumulation and the aggravation phases that develops dis-ease and dysfunction, and then how that keeps progressing to what we call disease, and once the physiology starts to break down. It sort of makes sense because I was like, oh, where was I not free? I wasn't being me. I was forcing my way through life. This forceful energy was creating exhaustion, and then I was doing these things to feel better, and it was all this resistance energy I was living in. And I was using my head a lot. So looking at like Chinese medicine, like Eastern medicine, it's like, oh, that makes sense. I had a lot of anger associated with the liver, and then like the liver and the brain tumor, this connection there in Chinese medicine. I'm like, oh, it makes sense that that's where that would occur. And then the irony of there is me trying to learn to prove I wasn't stupid, which was my story of being diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, and then stories I heard from other people to reaffirm it, and all these things. And then the brain tumor is always trying to protect my head. Meanwhile, my heart was always vulnerable, and I wasn't being vulnerable with it, which made it more vulnerable. But I always had helmet on, studying, trying to be intellectual and speak well and proper. And the brain tumors kept coming back. And now it makes sense. I wasn't free being me. I wasn't heart-centered. I was afraid of being rejected because I grew up being rejected, being denied my reality. So it makes sense that I would do these things and I get good at this thing, never equate to more than just enough to get by, even though I became a pro athlete and I was living the dream. And I get the message. I share with my surgeon after my last brain surgery, which I was awake for in 2021. I shared my hypothesis. I was like, hear me out. Epigenetics tells us the environment stimulates the gene. The environment is outside of ourselves, within our skin and outside of our skin. All these things interact with our perception and nervous system. My hypothesis is I'm living with a low-grade chronic stress response. It used to be really high and I wasn't aware. Now it's lower, but it's still there. And I believe that's protection. My nervous system's done a good job of keeping me safe. If I can work on this low-grade chronic stress response and work with my nervous system rather than fighting against it, the feeling it's not going to come back. Because over the last 12 years, each diagnosis severity has gone down as my awareness has gone up. And he winked at me. He said, you let me know how it goes. He's a nice man. He couldn't really comment, but it's been going well now.
My thoughts as I'm listening, it all makes sense. And you could have just gotten brain tumors. And like you, I've got to put something in its box and its place and make sense of it. Otherwise, I can't keep going and moving on. So I feel like I would probably do what you're doing. There's a reason why, and I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure I'm doing my part so I'm not feeding into it.
The caveat is that's how I started Fear Informed. I took on those perspectives because I was afraid of it coming back. And ironically, it came back multiple times until I started working on acceptance. I view it now through a spiritual lens. It makes sense. A purpose, I believe, the human experience is survival. That's the human conditioning. People's purpose is to overcome mental constraints, those mental prisons that we arrive with and are conditioned through. So that way we can experience freedom and liberation from the persona that we think is going to keep us safe, which is just an illusion. And by virtue of freeing ourselves more, we can help other people in the way that we feel called to.
What happened after that tumor was removed? The healing process was quicker than you expected.
Didn't know this. Don't know if you know this, but Scully requires 4 weeks to fuse back together.
No, I did not.
Okay.
Insane.
Week 4, went back to my surgeon. 4 titanium screws. They drill holes, cut the skull open, go and do the work, put it back, screw it in. MRI showed everything was healed nicely, and you just adjust, take another week off, and ease back into training. And so I did that. Felt super strange. Perioception. Your perception of balance, time, space, where you are. My wife's a sports medicine athletic trainer. And I'm like, she's going to kill me if I get this wrong. I think it's proprioception. Super off. I had been at that time almost half my life riding a bike at that level. felt super weird. I had to learn how to ride a bike again. Thankfully, it wasn't too difficult. I just put my foot down here and there, but just really unsure. Then get on the ramps, and that felt super strange. As weeks progressed, spinning and flipping again, understanding where I was in space was so strange. And that was a whole nother level of fear to work through. It wasn't for a year or two where I actually felt totally confident riding my bike again. But regardless, 5 weeks later, I started riding. 8 weeks after that, so 13 weeks out of surgery, I was back in England competing. And at that event, got a little excited in the best trick contest, fell and kind of shattered some bone chips in my elbow, and then had to go back to the hospital to get my elbow scoped because packing me up at the end of the trip, the floater piece got stuck and I couldn't move my arm. Flew back from England with a makeshift sling. And this was a scope, so I was back riding the week after that. Then 2012, a routine MRI showed 2 new growths. And it was on the same side, same location as the original tumor. My surgeon suspected because when they got in there, it was wrapped around my main artery and optic nerve. He suggested it was just residual cell growth because they couldn't risk hitting either of them and getting too close with the tissue for obvious reasons. I mean, stroke, paralysis, blindness, bleeding out, death, at the top of the 2-page risk factor list I had to sign off on because I was an adult then. He suggested radiation. Hated the sound of radiation. My mom went through radiation with colon cancer, and she alive and well today, but I saw what she went through and I heard what she went through. I didn't want to do it, so I found gamma knife radiation and went up to Tufts Medical Center in Boston to have the procedure done. I was very fortunate to have a metal frame anchored into my skull with 2 screws here and 2 screws back here while I was awake. Numbed, of course, but your head's vibrating, you're seeing drills and you're hearing it.
Gosh, Josh, that's like Hannibal Lecter stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
You had scars?
If you part my hair, my barber for like 8 years now, the first time he's like, you got a scar here? What happened?
He's like, what do you do with your free time?
Yeah, they did a good job. I mean, even the second surgery, they used the same scar and you would never know unless you get really close. But yeah, up here, the hair didn't grow back, but it's really small.
That was 2012?
That was like a week recovery because that old model, they had to put a stitch in each incision. I just had to wait for those to heal. Ironically, my skin healed fast, so they had to cut my skin to get the stitches out. So I had to wait another day. But yeah, I was like back on my bike and thankfully no residual side effects, and monitored them for 5 years and they slowly shrunk and stabilized. Best case scenario happened. It was February 2017 in the middle of the ESPN article with a BMX rider I looked up to growing up, who was at the time leading their BMX media section. And it was in the middle of it. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna go back to Duke and get an MRI, just a routine scan. And I remember telling him, I was like, well, they found 2 additional tumors now on the opposite sides. The original tumor and the 2 that grew back were on the left. These 2 were on the right. This wasn't an excuse of residual cell growth anymore. And all right, they're so small, like a little bit smaller than a blueberry each. So we just monitored them for years and they stabilized at some point. So there's no growth after that. But then we just monitored them and I got really passionate about the metabolic health. So got really into cleaning up my diet, even more so than I already was. Monitor them, no progression and feeling great.
Is this around that same time where you were taking the jug of water to the practice facility and avocados and you started feeling judged for those choices?
Yep. Yeah. At the time, there wasn't any, at least I was aware of nice tasting electrolyte powders. So I was putting pink Himalayan sea salt in my water.
Yeah.
And get made fun of that. I was, my snack when I was riding was an avocado with salt and lime on it. And I was enjoying it. It tasted great and got in really good shape. My endurance went up and I was riding stronger than the other riders.
Did they see that?
Yeah, it's all of it. They were complaining I was riding longer than everyone because I had higher endurance.
You think that created animosity?
Oh, sure. It's speculative now, but it's human nature to subconsciously be like, I don't like that because my relationship with that is making me uncomfortable because now I have to perform at a higher level.
How much of it is feeding into their own guilt system?
Oh, 100%. A lot of what I work on and how I define high performance is not about outcomes or what you do. It's about self-awareness. Yeah. The depth in which you know yourself, know thyself, is the depths of which you can perform well in something, because there's a difference of doing something really well with an expense versus doing something really well without that added expense that is choice. So a lot of people think they have to work really hard, outwork everyone, grind, not sleep, and not take care of themselves because they're working harder. And we know with research that continues to come out is if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't sleep well, you're working harder, but you're working longer. So then therefore you're working even harder because it's unnecessary because your output isn't higher quality, drops.
What drew you to step away from the BMX world, from actually being on your bike and taking on the work that you do now?
2016, my last year competing, best year ever. I was set up to compete again in the World Series 2017. I had a major nutrition brand as a sponsor, paid for all my travel. We even did a helmet wrap like Red Bull or Rockstar. The company that did the Red Bull helmets, I went to them because it wasn't an energy drink. They were able to do it. And it was a sick design that we came up with. That was a great season. I got the announcer of the series sponsored by the brand, and he was shouting them out and just hyping me up. I got some other riders hooked up. I got some other athletes outside of it hooked up. Starting 2017, a month after that third diagnosis in February, I was going to solidify our contract, and they were going to put me on salary that next year and pay for my travel, and that was all set. But then I found out, oh, my contacts are being fired and there's new ownership. Nestle bought the company and they cut the athlete budget, and they turned it into very much of a lifestyle focusing on women's health. It was, yeah, I think that's what they landed on. It was just what was no right or wrong. I just cut the program. The year after the non-compete and the NDA, then my contacts were like, yeah, we knew we were getting fired. That's why we gave you that budget the year prior. We wanted to help you. I've been with them for 5 years, just buying the stuff at first, just promoting it because I really loved it. So that all started in 2017. And I was like, I don't have the cash. It won't even make sense. I'd have to win every event to just break even to make a profit. And I wasn't going to win every event. Like my riding wasn't, and I am very well aware of where I was, unless the number one guy fell, which we still win. He was the first one to win the Olympics. He's an Australian rider. He's just a machine. And I was like, it doesn't make sense. I'm not going to be able to afford it. I spent all 2017 draining my savings trying to figure out what to do. I was informally coaching, and then I started getting paid to coach. I was traveling to events, meeting people, training in the gym and on the ramps, but I wasn't competing. I got a call to do a corporate gig. I got the call, hey, this private mortgage company is holding their annual sales rally in San Diego. It was my friend who owns an action sports choreographed with dance and parkour and gymnast type of show. And she's like, they're looking for an athlete to meet their theme this year, which is no limits. And I thought of you. Are you interested? I was like, yeah, sounds fun. And a week or two later, the EVP of the company interviewed me for an hour, asked if I coached. And in my mind, I was like, I haven't done that yet, but I blurted out, yeah, of course. And so I coached him and his executive team for 3.5, 4 months to the event in February where I was performing. It gave me a booth all set up. That's when I started signing on more clients. And then I stopped riding January of 2020 as an experiment to figure out who I am. Because I started to realize I'm passionate about this. I'm earning money to provide for myself through this coaching business. But every time I feel insecure, imposter syndrome, afraid, anxiety, stress, I go back and ride. It was like a safety blanket, and it became my flex. I would use it to validate myself in certain rooms. I was getting invited into certain rooms that I thought I had no business in because of it. And I started to realize, I was like, this isn't helping me. Every session got less and less fulfilling. And I get more stress. It's like this thing that used to help me is no longer helping me. It's hurting me now. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. It was my escape, and now it's holding me back at best. At worst, it's dragging me down.
It's interesting. Someone earlier in the career hears about, wait, I don't understand. What's wrong with using it as a flex and getting invited to the room? So then you describe it, well, no, that was holding me back. How can you help them understand at a young age when they haven't gained the wisdom to understand the difference?
The difference is being vulnerable with yourself. What's wrong with it being a flex? Why do you need it to be a flex? What's the flex's purpose? What would you be afraid it meant if you didn't have it as a flex? Who would you be without it? Those types of questions I've learned since, but I wasn't equipped with at the time.
Yeah.
Some part of me intuitively, intellectually was like, I got to figure out who the fuck I am. For 15, 17 years, I've been identifying with the BMX athlete. Hi, my name's Josh Perry. I'm a BMX athlete. I've been saying that daily for 17 years. And then I no longer was. There was such tension between my identity and what I was doing. In reality, it was mirroring to me. that I couldn't figure out what to do. There's a difference between leveraging something for strategic advantage versus leveraging it to feel better about who you think you are and who you're afraid of being. So that authenticity for attachment equation was happening again. I was collapsing my sense of safety with what I thought the world perceived me as and they wanted. So this gap of who I was growing. This was what I was projecting to the world, and this is who I was internally. It was growing until it collapsed. I was depressed for a year and a half. Pandemic happened as well. And my wife was like, I think you're depressed. I was like, I wasn't like doing anything anymore that I enjoy. I just want to stay in bed all day. I'm not depressed.
I don't like existing. Depression.
I wasn't feeling. So what I've learned now is a state of functional freeze. On the outside looks good.
Yeah.
I'm functioning.
Yeah.
Look healthy. On the inside, I'm suppressed. I'm shut down.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling. I'm suffering. I'm exhausted. I wondered why I was so tired all the time.
Yeah.
I do all these biohacks to fix, keywords, fix myself. That was a lot of the language I was unaware of. The BMX flex wasn't a flex. It was just a perceived sense of safety. It was an old identity my nervous system was trying to grip onto.
What do you struggle with? Where do you find yourself toiling over that you wish you didn't?
What it used to be was trying to remember all the things. I'd wake up with all these ideas I got to write down, these to-dos and these, I'm not doing enough, like all these things that get done. My wife's 14 weeks pregnant. That was intentional. We're excited. And also it brought up some old shit again, old financial shit, old survival things, old, I'm not going to be enough. I'm not going to be a good enough father because of my shit coming up. My wife joins me every other week with my therapist, which I'm very thankful for, that she feels that level of trust on top of her therapy work. We worked through it. It's so different for me than it was years prior. But I say all that because it's part of the journey. You can't have the light without the darkness.
It's right.
We can't have the things we want without a contrast of the things we don't want.
What was it about this podcast that you thought was a good idea for you to be on it?
Just I don't even remember what we talked about, but the way you reached out, we spoke a little bit. I knew I resonated with it. And that's the space I'm in now. If it feels good, yeah, I'm going to do it. And now this was affirmed. My intuition was on point because even before we started recording, it was just a conversation we had. It could have been an intro to the podcast, or maybe you'll leave it in. It just could have been something of value to people listening. That's the space I want to be in with people like yourself.
Thank you. All right. If you don't mind, let's jump into some rapid fire questions.
All right, sweet.
How do you define success? That one's a little unfair. It's not quite so rapid, but here.
Happiness.
What is happiness to you?
Fulfillment. The absence of the pursuit of being happy.
What was your dream job as a child, pre-BMX days?
The dream job?
Yeah.
It was always a professional athlete.
Yeah?
I want to go to UNC because that's where MJ went to the NBA. That was my original dream.
Fascinating.
Actually, before that, I think it was a musician. It's been a long time since I've thought of that.
Play an instrument?
I played instruments in school, nothing serious, but I really enjoyed singing.
You were born to entertain, huh?
It seemed like that. Yeah.
What is your path not taken?
Oh, yeah. In college.
Do you ever regret about not going to college?
No, I used to, but I realized I was kind of gaslit into believing I regretted it by former ex-girlfriends. I tried twice. In 2013, I enrolled and then I backed down and got a refund. In 2006,
how much longer after enrollment?
maybe a couple days later, when it was like, you have to buy your books and go to orientation. I was like,
gotta go, peace.
yeah. 2016, I was in a different relationship. I actually bought the books. I went to orientation. And then I was like, nope. And that was the last time.
Okay.
And then realized I didn't have to go to college and pay to learn. I can just best paths to directly learn what I want to learn.
What would that have given you?
Yeah, it was the illusion.
Know how to work a schedule? When you think about your BMX career, is there one situation or event that you think of when you think about feelings of effing up in your career?
Yeah, every contest, those thoughts came up.
Sure.
Especially with tricks I wasn't really comfortable with and dialed in on. I was like, oh man, what if I fall? What if I slip up? But any of those came and went all the time. I think I know everyone has those types of thoughts, whether they recognize it or not, or admit it or not.
How did stress most typically physically manifest in you?
What I label as like chronic fatigue. And I would always be interested in talking with doctors, especially mental health experts and scientists, how do you explain this feeling of fatigue, but I can perform well? I'm PRing certain numbers in the gym. I'm like, can train all day. It's when I'm locked in, but I'm just drained. Understanding the nervous system and functional freeze is like foot on the gas, foot on the brake. Makes sense.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Effing Up. I'm your host, Deanne Reinhardt. If you enjoyed today's episode and you would like to support the podcast, please subscribe on the platform you use to enjoy podcasts. Share Effing Up with others, post about it on social media, and or leave a rating and review. Until next time, count your perceived failures as part of your path to success. After all, we're all effing up.